Thank you again for joining us today. Our guest speaker today is Sheila Cavallo, who is with Mathematica, an amazing resume bio. I encourage you all to check it out on our website if you've not already had a chance to do so. Our conversation today is co-regulation, helping adolescents build their self-regulation superpowers. And Sheila, we are thankful that you are with us today, and we're going to just hand it over to you to get us started.
Thanks, Donna, and thanks for that intro. Yeah, I've been working in the youth serving space for, excuse me, quite a long time. And it's the best, it's some of the best work I do. And I'm always grateful and so excited about the opportunity to speak with other youth serving professionals. I'm really excited about the topic today, co-regulation. I have been in the field a long time. I didn't get involved with Mathematica until more recently. And so if you don't know about Mathematica, it's a research organization. Very broadly, it's a research organization. I'm not a researcher, I'm a practitioner. But I get to be the person who helps take research and I kind of build a bridge between researchers and practitioners. And that's also part of my work that I really love. This co-regulation work is really interesting to me because it may be the first time I've seen researchers, I'm not saying it's the first time it's happened, but it's the first time I've seen researchers sort of look at a part of serving youth that is kind of specific to the facilitator, him or herself. A lot of the work that's been done in research looks at curricula and core components and things like that. And I've said for more than 20 years, we need to be looking at facilitators. How is it they do this work, this incredible work? Because you can have a great curriculum, but if you don't have a great facilitator, I'm not sure how far you're going with that. So this is really exciting to me because co-regulation happens between adults and youth. It's the relation. It's part of it is the relationship between the relationship that we build as facilitators and educators with the young people that we serve. So it really is part of how we do as facilitators what we do. And so that's what's really exciting to me about this work, and I'm so glad to have the opportunity to share with you today. Next slide, please. To get our conversation going, we're going to pause. We're going to hit the pause button on co-regulation, and we're going to start by defining what self-regulation is and why self-regulation is so important. So let's jump right in with the next slide. Got a great graphic here. Some people learn through hearing, some people learn through doing, some people learn through seeing. And I learned through hearing, doing, and seeing, so I love having graphics to go with things. This triangle does a great job of sort of expressing the different components of self-regulation. Broadly defined, self-regulation is the act of managing our thoughts and emotions so we behave in ways that help us reach our goals. So you can see it through the written explanation there that these aren't, we're looking at them as separate parts of the what do you call that, pyramid, separate parts of the pyramid, but they're actually woven together. In that written description, you can hear how these things are stitched together into one whole. And we're going to be talking about them separately, but they all work together to make self-regulation happen. Next slide. Self-regulation is a great big long term that we use in our research study that PATH is a partner to us in. They're partnering with us to learn more about co-regulation and self-regulation. There's some other groups that are partnering with us as well in this work. It's really exciting, and I love spending time with everybody who is working with us on this. But it's a big sort of research word that we use, but there are these other words that are very similar to it that I think are more common for regular folks who are just out in the world like me doing work. Adaptability, how do we adapt to situations? Flexibility, can we pivot when we need to? Willpower, I've heard that a lot from my mom. You know, how much willpower do you have about something? Grit is a thing where I come from. Like, people have grit, right? And that's the ability to stick to it, right? And just power through and no matter what's happening, like, get to your goal, right? And keep it between the lines. Emotion regulation is something I think is more common in the research community. Executive functioning is also a term related to self-regulation, and that's more common in the research community. Self-discipline, I think, is one that is common across a lot of different communities. So all of these things, when we talk about self-regulation, we're talking about all of these things, right? Those are just some more common terms for it. Next slide, please. So the top of this pyramid, and that doesn't make it mean it's the most important, it's just the shape that we chose. The top of the pyramid is thoughts. That's the regular person word for cognitive regulation. I love all these big research terms. How am I thinking about something? That's really what it is. Our thoughts are really sort of how we manage impulse control, how we focus attention. Working memory is a part of our thoughts. Working memory is a very specific kind of memory, very temporary. It's not even short-term memory, it's like temporary memory. And it's where we do problem solving and decision making. So it's very important. It's a very critical skill for us to have. So you see problem solving there as well, adaptation and flexibility. The ability to see a problem not only from my own perspective, but someone else's perspective as well. Decision making inside of that process. The ability to look at a situation and appraise it, assess it. What is going on here? What are the different elements of it? And also planning and goal setting. Across the youth serving professionals that I have worked with over my career, planning and goal setting has always been something that we talk a lot about when we talk about adolescence, right? I think it's pretty common knowledge at this point that, excuse me, the human brain, like the frontal lobe, which is technically sort of in terms of how the brain has evolved over time, the frontal lobe is the newest part. It's also the part where we do decision making and long-term planning. It's the last part of the brain to fully develop in a human being, right? And it's not fully developed until age 25. So the young people that we're working with, the adolescents that we're working with, the teenagers, don't have a fully functional frontal lobe yet. So when we talk about planning, goal setting, making decisions and thinking about long-term consequences, they don't have all of that online yet. That's a great opportunity for us as youth serving professionals to kind of come along them and kind of be their wing person on that. Self-regulation is part of that. Helping them build the self-regulation skills are part of that. So in addition to thoughts, down in the right-hand part of the triangle or the pyramid on the next slide is emotional regulation, emotion regulation. That's emotions. That's how we feel, our feelings about things. I hear people say now, like, I'm in my feelings about it. And I love that phrase because I think that is spot on. We get in our feelings about something, right? When we think about feelings in terms of self-regulation and building self-regulation skills, what we're talking about is our ability to calm and soothe ourselves. Our ability to label an emotion, to actually be able to name it and express it. Because naming it and expressing it are critical to being able to manage it. If we can't name it, we can't figure out what it is, it's really hard to manage that thing. How much distress toleration do we have? If we're in a situation that's going sideways and it's tense and uncomfortable and there's conflict, how much tolerance do we have for staying inside of that situation to be able to manage it, right? And to be able to resolve it. Mindfulness and self-reflection. This is really just about being mindfulness. I think gets a bad rap as a term, but I think it's really just about knowing ourselves. What's going on with me right now? You know, what's happening right now in this moment? And can I reflect on how I'm behaving in this moment or how I'm reacting in this moment? Can I see myself clearly in this moment? Identifying, challenging, and changing unhelpful feelings or thoughts. So no, I will argue that no emotion is bad. Emotions are just emotions. They're just feedback. They're a system, they're one of the body's systems for giving us information about what's going on. So the emotion itself isn't bad, but if it's acting in a way, if the emotion is creating behavior, right, and that's the next part of it, is the emotion serving me well? Is experiencing this emotion a good thing? Is it serving me well? Does it help moving me toward my goals? If it isn't, how can I change it? That's a part of emotion regulation. How do I move it from an emotion that's not serving me well into one that can serve me better, right? And then practicing empathy and compassion. This, I think, is really important, not just to the individual, but to our communities. Are we helping young people develop the ability to care about each other? Are we helping them develop the ability to show empathy for others? Because in order to be, I think, a healthy community and a high-functioning community, we need those things. We need empathy and we need compassion. We need to be able to see things from somebody else's point of view and care about that. Doesn't mean we have to agree with it, but we got to care about the other people around us, right? In order to have a healthy and strong community. And I think that's that's a really important part of our work. I don't know that we talk about it very often, but I think it's a really important part of our work. So the other part of the triangle there, the left-hand section at the bottom, is behaviors. These are the things that we can see. So I may not be able to, I can't necessarily see somebody else's emotion. I can't see what they're thinking. If they tell me what it is, yes, but I can't just observe it, right? I can observe behaviors. So I can see what other people are doing. So the behaviors that are associated with self-regulation, with behavior regulation, that quadrant or that part of self-regulation, organization, the ability to organize things, right? The ability to cope, to practice coping skills. The inhibition, right? So if somebody sits down a chocolate cake next to me, do I have the ability, and I will be honest and say sometimes I have it, sometimes I don't. Do I have the ability to inhibit my impulse to eat the chocolate cake, right? Some days are better than others on chocolate cake inhibition. Delay of gratification, same thing. Like, can I look at that chocolate cake and say, if I eat it right now, I'll mess up my dinner, I won't have an appetite for dinner, so I'm gonna have dinner, and I'm gonna delay enjoying that chocolate cake until sometime after dinner. So delayed gratification. Communication and conflict resolution. Are we able to talk to each other about how we feel, about how we're experiencing a situation? And can we resolve conflict in a way that is positive and serves the community well, serves us and the community well? Pro-social and cooperative actions, that final bullet point there, I think that's also about our communities and how we work together and build things together and weave connections to one another, which are also really important parts of being fully formed and healthy, productive human beings. Next slide, please. We're going to go pretty quickly through this. Self-regulation is a system, right? It's it's almost like an engine, if you kind of think about it, about these different parts that work together. So for us as adults, we may think in terms of, as an example, we're stressed at work. There's just too much to do. I would bet most everybody on this call can relate to that scenario. And in response to that, the thought part, the top part of the pyramid is, I'm stressed. That's the thought that occurs to us. And then the emotion part in the bottom right part of that pyramid is the feeling of anxiety. I feel anxious in response to this stressful situation. The behavior part is what you might see, right? And so that's going to be, when we think of fight, flight, or freeze, those are kind of our options, some of our options of behavior. Those would be the options that come from not the frontal lobe, right? The part of the brain that helps us make good decisions. That's not the frontal lobe, fight, flight, freeze. That's the amygdala. And that's one of the oldest, most ancient parts of the brain, right? And the amygdala was there back in the day when, if you were being chased by a saber-toothed tiger, the amygdala kicked in. Because if it was your frontal lobe, you're like, oh, there's a tiger and I could be eaten. Let me problem solve this. Well, you're already eaten at that point, right? So your amygdala had to kick in and be like, run. You got to run. There's no other option, right? And so all the adrenaline dump goes and the amygdala gets us moving. That's great in the case when we're being chased by a tiger or a bear. It doesn't work well for the modern stressors like stressed at work. Fight, flight, or freeze at work isn't going to serve us well, right? So this is the first part of the system. And if we go to the next slide, you can see how if we don't have great self-regulation skills, if we haven't figured out how to do that yet, we can get caught in this loop, right? We get to the freeze, cry, eat, yell, throw hands, whatever it is we're going to do about stress at work. And then it goes back to causing us more stress. And you can see how this just loops, right? But when you get to the next part where you see the self-regulation skills kick in, right? So you get to, I'm feeling anxious, And when you get to the do, when you get to the behavior, instead of fight, flight, freeze, you have the ability to inhibit, right? That inhibit behavior. I can inhibit the negative actions that are maybe going to make the situation worse or not going to serve me well. Then from inhibition, I can go back into thinking and feeling to appraise my reaction and label my emotion. Okay, this is anxiety and it's manageable. I know what it is. It's not in control of me, I'm in control of it. That's the thinking and focusing part, right? When I get into the thinking and focusing part, then I'm able to problem solve it. Because what I've done is stopped the move. Once we move out of the frontal lobe into the amygdala is driving the bus. We don't want the amygdala driving. It's a crappy driver. So what we've just done is made sure that the frontal lobe stays in the driving seat, because the frontal lobe is where we think and problem solve. So that's where we want to be. We can also, in the feeling part, say, I'm going to self-soothe. I've got some skills around calming myself, and I'm going to use those. And then I'm going to tolerate the distress in the moment, because I know it's going to be short-lived. It's only going to last a little while. I can get through this. And then I'm going to organize myself to achieve my goals around this situation. And then maybe I might ask for help or execute a plan. So you can see how those self-regulation skills then get you where you need to be. It interrupts this cycle, right? It gets us out of that cycle and moves us to solution and moves us into a place where we can be successful. You can go on. You can go ahead to the next slide. This second part, this self-regulation part on the right-hand side, this is where we are able to attain goal achievement. This is where we're able to learn the lessons. You know, when people say when you lose, don't lose the lesson, this is how we learn those lessons. This is how we are able to grow our self-regulation skills and our confidence and our self-efficacy. I say we because I'm still doing that work at my age now, and I know other people who are as well. I think it's a lifelong pursuit. But we can, as adults, come in beside young people whose frontal lobe isn't quite as developed as ours is and help them build out these skills so they can get to that second part of the system. Next slide, please. So why does it matter? It's a complex system, and it can have a lot of impacts for us, right? It is also foundational to individual and collective well-being. We've spoken to that a little bit before, right? If we can't manage our emotions, if we can't problem solve, if we can't do that second part of the self-regulation system, we're really kind of hosed up. And it also, you know, when we have a lot of people in our community who aren't able to access the latter part of all of those self-regulation skills, you can imagine how that impacts our community and the life of our community, right? So although this is complex, self-regulation can change. We can develop it. It can be enhanced from youth and childhood. It's not one of those things that has a critical period very early on. If we don't get it, we never get it. I'm still getting it. I'm still building those skills. I'm still building those muscles. So this is something we can absolutely do. Next slide, please. How do we do it? That's the question, right? We can do it. How do we do it? How do we develop self-regulation? Here are the big things to remember. Flexible attention, right? Can we flex our attention to attend to the things we need to? Can we change our focus to benefit ourselves? Working memory, that's that very short-term temporary memory that allows us to problem solve. Inhibitory control, I won't eat the chocolate cake right now. And emotion management, I may be sad about not eating the chocolate cake right now, but I can think about how I'm going to feel later when I do eat it, and I feel better about that, right? So there's all of these things on the right. We're not born with that. That doesn't come like loaded into the system. We learn them over time, and practice makes perfect, right? I mean, the thing is that in my childhood, right, nobody was going, hey, check out these superpowers. Let's talk about those. How might you figure out how to use those? In this situation that you're in right now, which superpowers would you use, right? Nobody did that. Nobody was intentional about that for me. We have the opportunity to do that with adolescents. And I think particularly now, given the difficulty of the last 3 years with the pandemic and how that just derailed their development in some ways. I think it's more important now. I think it's always been important, but what an opportunity for us to provide this kind of support to them that is going to improve their lives and their ability to lead productive lives that they feel good about and they feel fulfilled in. So
Sheila,
that's, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm going to interrupt for just a second because we had a hand raised.
Sure.
So I think we have questions,
Yes.
and I didn't ask at the beginning if you prefer to wait to the end or do you want me to interrupt you?
Go ahead and interrupt me and we'll see how it goes. I have a tendency to follow trails of things and then I run out of time, but we'll try it.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay. I think it was Dave. Did you have your hand raised? Okay, well, I don't see it raised now, so I interrupted for nothing. My apologies. I'll pay better
No
attention.
worries. That's okay. That's, you know what? The digital environment is always so interesting. I'm the least skilled person in this environment, so I appreciate everyone else and their contributions to helping me get through it too.
Okay,
Adolescence,
no problem.
yeah, absolutely. So the next slide is about how adolescence is really kind of prime time for this, right? There's a lot of growth going on in adolescence. There's puberty. I didn't enjoy it personally, but yeah, I can see how that was, transitional. And and then there's that quote, be the adult you needed when you were young, right? Brain development is maximized, right? Puberty didn't feel good, but brain development, man, that was off the charts, right? There was a lot going on there. Personality and identity is continually changing. So when young people become adolescents, their work changes, right? And their work sort of becomes individuation. Like up until then, they've kind of defined themselves through their families. I am a member of this family. This is who I am. And then they get into adolescence, and this is why peer groups it's so intensely important to them, because they're figuring out, well, who am I in addition to that? Like I've defined myself as a part of this family, but there's a wider world. So in adolescence, the world is getting bigger and they're redefining themselves as they start to move out into that bigger world. They're expanding socially and emotionally. And so there's so much rich opportunity to come alongside them and just help them build these self-regulation superpowers. Next slide, please. Stress and trauma are interesting, right? Not all stress is bad. I can tell you, my mother used to get on to me all the time about being a procrastinator, and I always knew the way she said it was bad. You're such a procrastinator, and I'm like, I can't help it. And what I didn't figure out until I was in probably my late 20s was that I need the pressure of an imminent deadline to be able to focus. I never missed a deadline. I would wait till the last minute to do things, which drove her crazy because she never does. And she thinks it's just putting things off and waiting till the last minute and then it's crazy. But for me, it really was about my brain not really being able to focus on something until I had the pressure of an imminent deadline. And then once I had it, I was like, okay, great. I was super laser focused. So in that case, for me, that kind of stress actually assisted me. Situations where we're unfamiliar with things or we're learning a new skill, that's a kind of stressful situation, right? But it's leading to growth. So all stress is not bad, but it can become toxic if we're just sort of always living in this stress soup, right? If we never, because we weren't built to do that. We were built to experience stress, and then we have all the cortisol and all that stuff gets involved, and we deal with the bear or the tiger and we run away and we're successful, and then all of that goes away. And it stays away until the next stressful situation happens, hopefully later. In modern life, it almost seems like we experience a lot of stress almost continually, and particularly for children and youth who are experiencing high degrees of trauma, right? And I think of the last 3 years and all of that interruption on top of the kinds of things that kids in our communities face just on the regular, right? Chronic or toxic stress can disrupt normal brain and socio-emotional development. That sounds terrible. That's frightening to me, right? that this toxic stress that's going on is actually interrupting that process of their growth. You might have heard of these things referred to as ACEs, adverse childhood experiences. There was a big study on that. These stress hormones that are produced in reaction to these traumatic events disrupt normal processes of growth and regulation. So this toxic stress can then impact the parts of the brain that are involved in self-regulation, right? And that then places people at risk for additional trauma, like more trauma. So the thing to remember, and I think it's really important for us to remember as youth serving professionals, is that the damage from toxic stress can be reversed. This is not a one-way street. We can do something about this. Adolescents, because there's so much development going on, there's a lot of opportunity to form new brain connections. It's really, brain science is fascinating. There's a part of it, like we get to a certain part of talking about it and it's beyond me, I don't get it. But the front end of that, I'm like, wow, I geek out at sort of how the brain develops and how it literally is developing pathways through experience. And when most of the experiences or many of the experiences are trauma-based, then the pathways that are being developed are the fight, flight, freeze pathways, right? The pathways that connect parts of the brain to the amygdala. And then those become like superhighways. But when we help them build these other skills, then what we're building is the superhighways in the brain that engage the frontal lobe. And that's what we want to be building, right? So how do we do that? Safe, nurturing environments, supportive relationships, these things are what promote healthy development and provide a kind of a level of protection or a buffer against chronic stress and trauma. So that's really important information to have. We're going to speed through these next few slides. It's just, I think, good context to have. We have many ways to support the development of self-regulation. There are lots of them. I would argue that as youth serving professionals, some of this stuff we've been doing by instinct anyway. When I first got into co-regulation work and I was looking at it, I was like, holy cow, I was doing that. I didn't know I was doing that, but I was doing that. When I started doing it more intentionally, I just got better at it. And I thought, this is very cool. And then when all of these great partners with PATH and the other organizations that we were working with in this work, partnering with in this work, when these folks came on and said, yeah, raise their hand, hey, we'll do this work, we're interested, and we're like, thank you, yeah, come partner with us and let's look and see how this works and figure out how to spread this farther, right? Because this is really good stuff. We also have many sources of trauma and toxic stress that can disrupt the development, but we know how to do it. And if we can get in on those and help support young people through those traumatic events and those stressors and give them these and help them build these self-regulation skills, we're winning. We're moving the needle, and that's really important. So the next slide, so this is the model of social ecological development, right? At the sort of center of it is the individual. And this is our biology and our personality. That's what is happening for us at the individual level. Next slide, please. And then just adjacent to that is interpersonal, right? So this is our family, the people in our household, our family, our friends. So like our close connections. Beyond that, next slide, is the organizations we might be touched by, right? And so for young people, this may be schools. It may be a Boys and Girls Club. It may be after school activities, right? So all of these things that are just sort of adjacent then to family and friends. And beyond that, on the next slide, is community, the broader community. What's going on in the environment? What's going on in somebody's larger neighborhood? What can contribute to social well-being? And what can contribute or detract from or be a barrier to connectedness to others? Beyond that is one more, and that's societal, the societal sort of realm, policies, laws, and culture. All of those things also create the environment in which we are building self-regulation skills, right? So this is how we develop, and these are all the things that sort of impact our development. Next slide, please. So that's the skinny on So we're here on the interpersonal part, right? I mean, as educators, as facilitators, as people that are interacting with young people, particularly when we're pursuing co-regulation, because we are pursuing warm and nurturing relationships with them as a part of that work, we're at the interpersonal, right? And there's a ton of opportunity for us there. So then what is co-regulation? So if all of that we just ran through and I just sped through, if all of that is self-regulation, what is co-regulation? What is it? And why is it important? That information starts on the next slide, right? This is wonderful how this works. This cool graphic on the right is such a wonderful visualization for self-regulation. In the middle, the sort of green part there is our triangle from earlier: behavior regulation, emotion regulation, and cognitive regulation. So that happens at youth, that's youth self-regulation. That's happening inside of them, like as an individual, right? And then around the outside, that blue part, that skinny blue part that kind of looks like a belt, of that blue arrow, adult self-regulation. So this is what we're doing inside of this model as the adults in their lives. We're practicing our own self-regulation. We have to model it, right? If we can't self-regulate, it becomes very difficult for us to help somebody else develop the capacity to self-regulate. So that's why we are practitioners and teachers of self-regulation at the same time. Also, modeling it, as you guys know, is a hugely powerful way to teach, right? What you see in the blue circle with the yellow sort of circle and the blue circle and the red circle, that co-regulation piece, those are the elements. Those are the levers that we pull in order to help youth develop these self-regulation superpowers. We build relationships, warm, supportive, accepting, nurturing. This builds trust, right? I mean, it's really hard to learn from somebody that you don't trust to be straight with you and to care about you. So these warm, nurturing relationships are part of the co-regulation work. And then to the right of that, the blue circle is the environment, right? And this is about creating an environment where they can learn, where they feel safe to maybe practice new skills that they haven't practiced before, where they feel safe to talk about the things that are stressors for them and to share about the things that have been a part of their experiences that have been potentially traumatic, right? So supportive and safe spaces and experiences. This is sort of this is the environment we create so that this work can occur. So we've got the relationship so that we have the connection that supports it, and then we have the environment so they can feel safe doing this development work, right? And then at the bottom is skills coaching. So there's part of self-regulation that is a concept, and then there's actual skills you can use. This is the tool belt. And I love the tool belt because that's really the meat of it, right? I can talk to a young person about all of these processes that happen when they become dysregulated and all of that, right? And that's all conceptual. But when I say, hey, when you start to feel stressed, try this technique. Well, that's a tool. And that's where the power is, right? Because that's what's going to change the situation. Them using that tool is going to change the situation. So this is us modeling using those tools, which is really important, teaching the tools, providing opportunities for them to practice them, and then reflecting on them, right? So having them practice them and then ask them what that experience was like and what did they think about it, right? So let's go ahead and go to the next slide. This is how we can be good co-regulators. This is sort of our job as co-regulators. We got to be aware, right? We have to know what's going on with us. How are we feeling and how are we responding in stressful situations? I have to know that in order to be effective as an educator. And I would think, most folks who work with youth, whether you're an educator or a caseworker or after school, whatever your role is and you're working directly with young people, because you're swimming in a sea of stress too, and you've got to know what's going on with you in order to be able to communicate effectively with others and interact effectively with others. Or to at least know that, like, today's a bad day for me. And this happens to me sometimes. And I'll just tell the people around me, I'm like, this is a crazy, stressful day for me, and I'm sorry that I'm a little crazy today. Please don't take it personally, and I'm working on it, right? So it's that awareness that I have, and to be able to say to others, this may be impacting you, and I'm sorry, and I'm working on it, you know? So we have to notice, and this is specific, not just notice what's going on with us in terms of what we feel, that awareness, but we have to notice our own assumptions, thoughts, and beliefs about young people. What do we think we know about them? What are we assuming about them? And what are the implications of those thoughts and beliefs and assumptions that we have? Sometimes I look at adolescents and I'm like, what a hot mess. I mean, yeah, I've got some nieces. I'm like, what are you doing? What are you doing? And then I kind of have to check myself, because sometimes something's about to come out of my mouth that is going to sound like my mom did, right? And it's going to sound like it's going to be dismissive, or it's going to, you know, and I just have to check that. I'm like, what's the assumption you've got going on right now, Sheila? And what is the potential impact of that? All right, you're going to have to like hold that in. Don't open your mind to what else might be going on here, and listen, be a good listener, right? And then we need to use the strategies that we know work for self-regulation to remain calm ourselves and to be able to respond with compassion, which can be very, very difficult. I have worked in juvenile justice environments and foster care environments where there's been high trauma, and you can see the effects of that. And sometimes it feels personal, you know, the hitting out. And so it can be hard. There were times when I just had to step away sometimes and like check myself and get calm again before I could go back in and say, this is a young person who needs my help. You know, 5 minutes ago, they were a young person that was trying me. And I just was not having it, right? And I had to take a minute to remember, this is a young person who really needs my help. You know, who's been through a lot and really needs my help. And what's happening right now is an echo of all of that they've been through. So who can I be right now that can help them? But that's a skill, right? So that's what we have to do as co-regulators. All right, let's talk about some strategies, some actual strategies. There are more than 3, but we'll go with these. This is where we started with this group of awesome professionals who are partnering with us in this work. We were like, let's start with these 3 and see what happens. What do you think? And they're like, we're on board, right? And so everybody at PAST that's working with us is started here, and we're learning a lot from their great work about how this works. So we'll go through these one at a time. The first one is welcoming, and that's the next slide. So welcoming is pretty easy. Oh, none of these are hard, okay? Welcoming is literally the first step of welcoming is this worksheet, right? And everybody who comes into the group gets this worksheet, and it's got 3 parts. What would you like to be called? I know what your name is on the roll that the teacher gave me or that the after-school program gave me, but what name do you prefer, right? And then something that you'd like me to know about you. What's something you want me to know? And then the third part, in class, and so we use this, all of our partners right now are implementing in classroom settings. They have school partners, but you could do this anywhere. If you're not working with someone in class, you could say, you know, when we're together in group or whatever that is, I like it when you. So they're saying, when we're in group, I like this. And some of what we've seen come back is a student will say in class, I like it when you don't call on me. I don't like being called on in class. It makes me nervous. And so giving this sheet first thing allows us 2 things. We get to learn something that's important. We get information that's important for building a relationship, but it also communicates a message. I care about you as an individual. I'd like to know more about you. And don't underestimate the power of the name thing too. Years ago, I was working in a program, and it was a juvenile justice program. And months later, we reached out to some kids who had some young men who had left the program, and we asked them to come and do like an interview about what the program was like for them. And I got to sit in on some of those interviews. I wasn't the interviewer, I was just kind of in the corner or whatever. But they asked this one young man and said, what made this different? What made this different for you, this program? And he said, they cared about us. And she said, what did they do that made you know they cared about you? And he didn't even think about it. I mean, immediately he said, they knew our names. And I'll never forget it. I'm telling you, this was maybe 12 to 15 years ago. I will never forget that moment. And that was a huge teaching moment for me about the power of knowing and using somebody's name and how it can make someone feel seen, right? So simple things that have a lot of power. That's welcoming. How do we create the welcoming environment? We start with the sheet and then we go to greet. So if you can, if you have, and there's some environments where this is harder to do, but when you can, warmly welcome everybody who comes in. Greet them, use their names. It can be hard to learn names. That's a challenge for me to learn names, but I try really hard because I know how important it is. And I just, every time somebody comes in, I just want to say to everybody as they come in, hey, Jim, it's so good to see you today. Stella, you're looking great today. So great to have you here today, right? And just a simple greeting. And then the third part is a meet. And this is when you connect one-on-one with an individual youth for maybe 60 to 120 seconds. It's more than the greet, it's longer than the greet, and it's specific, right? Following up to form an authentic, responsive connection. And I have seen this in action when I've observed our partners do this work. And sometimes it's, hey, I came to the game this week, your basketball game this week, your performance was amazing. And I just looked at this youth and looked at her face and she was like, you came to my game? And she was like, yeah, I came to your game and you did a great job. You know, somebody else, hey, that, you know, I heard somebody say, I heard an educator say to a young person, a facilitator say to a young person, hey, that science fest you were worried about, how'd that go? You know, and then maybe that conversation went on for a minute, maybe 60 seconds at most. But this young person is like, she remembered something I said to her and she followed up with me, you know? So it's simple things. They can be hard to do sometimes in constrained environments where you don't have a lot of time, or you have 32 kids and there's only one of you. But to the extent that you can deploy that, I mean, there's a lot of power in it. All right, positive praise. We talk about this as well. So there are two different kinds of praise that we talk about specifically with youth inside of our work with our partners right now in terms of co-regulation. Two-part verbal praise. And so the guidelines for this are make it personal, right? It's, again, using somebody's name. Hey, Stephen. And then you have to make it specific. State the what. What exactly are you praising for? The name the specific behavior, effort, skill, right? So I had to get out of the habit of saying, great job, because that's really vague, right? And I had to really make a point to say, Stephen, thanks for holding the door for everybody coming in. You know, they were loaded down with, you know, bags and packs, and I saw that, man. That was awesome. Great way to care about your community, you know? And so making it specific also says, I saw you. I saw you making an effort. And it's important. You impacted our community. That was great, right? You can do this publicly. You can do this in front of the group. But if you have one of those students who has said, I don't like to be called out in class, it's uncomfortable for me, then you can also do it one-on-one, right? Praise can prompt and encourage behavior as well. I've seen this happen in my own work where I will publicly praise one student for something, and then now these other students, unprompted by me, are on the hunt to find things that they can do that contribute in a similar way, right? Because they've seen somebody be acknowledged for it. So it's a great way to reinforce the kind of behavior you'd like to have happen inside of your group. 4-part written praise is a little bit different. What I like about it is because it can be saved and reread. And I have so many handwritten notes that I've received over many years that I will not get rid of. Because every time I take them out and read them, it reminds me of a person. It reminds me of an experience. It reminds, you know, when someone takes the time to write me a thank you note and tells me what I did that had impact for them, I'm like, oh, wow, somebody saw that. Somebody saw that I did that. And it was meaningful for them. I'm not just out here, you know, screaming in the wilderness. Something I did changed something for somebody. And that's powerful for me. So I literally have a box. I keep all of those things. And sometimes I hang them on the wall as well. very specifically, you make it personal. Again, it's like, hey, Steve, and in your note, hey, Steve, I really appreciate you taking the time to help your classmates drag all their gear in, right? So make it, you want to praise an effort or an accomplishment, not a natural ability, right? It needs to be an action. Natural ability can feel like, and I've seen this with people, they're like, oh, well, that's just, and I'm like, no, that's something you have. That's an attribute that you have that I admire. It's just more powerful when I say you did this thing and it had impact and I saw it. Thank you for that, right? So that's why we want to make it specific to an effort or an accomplishment. And tie it to the bigger picture. So in my examples, hey, Steve, thanks for helping your classmates drag all their stuff in. That was you were a great role model in that moment of caring for your community and being compassionate and helping others. You make our group better through leading in that specific way. Thank you. So it's really specific. You can use any format. I've seen groups that have printed up cards that have their program name on it. And so it looks like a really official kind of, not document, but an official card or sometimes it's a postcard, sometimes it's a bifold card, but it has a logo, it has the program logo on it. And then it also that gives it sort of the extra heft of sort of coming from not just this individual that I know, but from it's official, it's from their organization, right? It's from this program that's meaningful to me. You can also use this with students who might not experience praise often. It's really easy to find opportunities to praise the kids who are very vocal in class and contribute a lot in class. It can be harder with kids who are quiet. And written praise can sometimes help with that. You can go back to the sheet and find something that they want. I wanted you to know, oh, I have this dog, I really love him. I have a dog, I have a lab mix and I really love him, and that's what I want you to know about me. And you might say, I have a dog too, and I think it's great that you spend so much time with your dog. That's a great way to show kindness and compassion for another being, So they're harder because you don't hear from them as often. They don't give you as many opportunities, but you can find ways, I think, to use written praise that also help them not feel like it's happening publicly, right? And that's a better way to communicate with them. All right, so here's what I want to do now. The next slide looks like it's blank, but it's not really. It's just to give you, if you don't want to close your eyes, just a soothing feel. Here's what we're going to do. We are going to practice the third skill, and it is called breath to focus. So here's what I would like you to do right now. If you want to close your eyes, you can, or you can just look at this lovely field of pastel dots, whatever feels better for you. And what I'd like you to do is just get comfortable in your seat and just take a breath in, a good one. Inhale deeply from your diaphragm, like from the bottom. Let your body just fill up with air. When you come to the top of that breath, let it go. And then repeat, do it again. Just pull in all of that air. And let it go again. And this time when you pull in air, I want you to think about what it feels like. So go ahead and breathe in. Feel the air coming in. It's cool, sort of coming in. And feel what does it feel like for your chest to expand out like that? And when you exhale, what does it feel like? The air coming out is maybe a little warmer, kind of moist, maybe. And maybe you feel your body kind of relax as your chest kind of smaller. And now just keep breathing at whatever pace feels comfortable for you. In and out. And you have nothing else to do. Breathe. That's all you have to do. as deeply as feels good to you. And as you let it go, you let it all go. You just let everything go. The breath goes and everything goes with it. And in this moment, this is all you have to do. You are not responsible for anything else. Just you and your breath. When you're ready, if you had your eyes closed, you can open them back up. And just kind of do a scan. How do you feel? What's the impact? Here's the science. If you can control your breathing for 2 minutes, you can change the biochemistry of your brain. That's the thing. That's real. I'm going to say that again, because every time I say it, I think to myself, holy cow. If I can control my breathing for just 2 minutes, I can change the biochemistry of my brain. There is so much in the world I cannot change. I cannot impact. I have no control over. Some really crazy stuff sometimes. But this thing, I can change the biochemistry of my brain. And when I change the biochemistry of my brain, what else does that change inside of my body? What does it make available to me in terms of focus, the ability to pay attention, or the ability to problem solve? Wow. What comes online for me when I change the biochemistry of my brain? That's a superpower. Man, if there is anything in the world that is a superpower for regular mortals like us, it's being able to change the biochemistry of your brain. So this is breath to focus. This is the final skill that we started with last fall with our partners. So I just demonstrated for you like a 2-minute breath to focus. Some people go shorter. I like to go longer because the shorter breaths, I think, don't give people enough time to really feel what can change for them if they give it a shot. So demonstrate the technique. You have to model it authentically too. So if you're not on board with it yet, you might want to practice it yourself. I had to do this myself. I had a friend, she was like, just breathe. Because I used to say to myself, I need to develop a meditation practice. I have so much stress. And people would say to me, people who are into meditation, they're like, calm your mind, quiet your mind. I'm like, do you know me? My brain is never quiet. My mind never shuts up, right? And so it always felt like it was outside of my ability to do it. And then I had a friend, she was like, it's really just breathing. You're just breathing. She was like, set an egg timer for 10 seconds. Breathe for 10 seconds. Tomorrow, do it for 15. Tomorrow, the next day, do it for 20. She was like, you're just building a muscle like anything else. And when she told me that and freed me from free your mind, don't think about anything, I was like, oh, I'm just going to breathe. Okay. And she was like, and just focus on the breathing. What does it feel like? And that made it so much more accessible to me. But still, I had to practice that to really feel the benefit of it. And once I did, then I was able to say to other people, this made a difference for me. And that's when, like, knowing it in your own heart and knowing it in your own gut is, I think, what makes us better ambassadors for self-regulation skills, right? So we want to model it authentically. You might get some pushback because it may feel weird. I mean, this is not something we're taught to do. And so the first few times we do something, like anybody who's ever tried to drive a stick shift for the first few times, that's a nightmare. But if you quit and you get out of the car, you never learn to drive, right? So you just kind of got to stick with it. That's what happened to me. I learned on a stick shift. Push through the awkwardness, right? Demonstrate it. Demonstrate the behavior. Give them time to feel the impact of it and invite them to join. Like, nobody has to do it, but hey, try breathing with me. This is this really cool thing. And here's the other thing too. It's not weird, right? I mean, pro athletes do this. If you watch the guys when they step up to the free throw line in basketball, what do they do before they take that shot? Watch them. They're breathing. and they are breathing to focus that shot. That's exactly what they're doing. In the military, the SEALs and the Special Forces teams, they don't call it breath to focus, they call it tactical breathing. And when they're going into a situation where they need a high degree of focus, they practice, they call it box breathing. It has a really specific structure, but it's a controlled breathing. It is a focused breathing. So it's actually practiced by a lot of different people that just want to focus their ability, they just want to focus the task they're engaging in, right? You can also use it to de-stress. So it's really great for a lot of different things, but they have to practice it and feel the impact to really buy in. So and you have to model it authentically and give it the time and space to make that impact for them, right? You can also plan when to use it. Sometimes you just use it, right, when you need it, but you can also plan when you're working with youth when to use it. Anticipate when the breath to focus skill would be useful, like when you're transitioning between activities, or at the top of the hour when kids first come into the classroom and they just came out of a hallway with 10,000 people in it, and it's all this crazy energy running around, and it's great, it's fantastic energy, but you need to focus it, right, in order to get them to pay attention to what you're doing. So you can use it for transitions like that, or transitions between activities. Identify when and how you're going to introduce the skill, so you know and you have confidence about going into that with them. And then integrate the strategy during your planned transitions. If you get to where you plan to use it and it doesn't feel like it's going to work for you, right, then you can pivot and, not use it or try something else. But I'm going to encourage you, even if you're worried or you're a little hesitant because you're not sure how it's going to be received, try it anyway, because the more we do it as adults, the more we do it ourselves, practice it ourselves, and the more we practice introducing it to others, the more confident we become. This is, you guys know this is true for all the work we do. The more times I facilitate a particular curriculum, the more times I become confident in delivering the activities that curriculum includes, right? Breath to focus is no different. None of these skills is any different from that, right? Breathe is needed. So there's breathe as planned and then breathe as needed. Use breath anytime you or youth are experiencing intense emotions, right? But also use it, that first bullet point, and that's the reason it's the first bullet point. I think we tend to think of it in terms of, we're going to use this when we need to correct something that's gone wrong. But that full first bullet point is, let's use it when we just want to focus the great energy we already have. I did it before I signed on to do this presentation. I'm like, let me focus on the thing because I got a lot going on. Let me just take 2 minutes to breathe and focus on this presentation and these folks I'm going to be talking to this afternoon. Let me do that, right? And it just gave me the focus to come in and get this done, and to deliver this important information. So when we think about it as a tool for focusing attention, and it can also be used to help us in stressful moments, right? So then it doesn't feel like it's a punitive action. The worst thing in the world when we look at people and we're like, you need to calm down. Nobody ever calms down in response to that statement, right? It's almost like throwing the match into the puddle of gasoline. You need to calm down, right? So we don't want it to be a you need to calm down thing. But how can we focus this great energy we have today? Let's breathe and focus that energy. We've got a lot of great things going on. Let's breathe and focus that energy, right? Hey, that was a really heavy topic we just talked about. Does anybody feel like doing maybe just a couple minutes of breathing? Yeah, let's do that. That sounds great. So that's how breath to focus works, right? It sounds like it's bigger than it is, I think, right? It's just breathing, but it's just breathing intentionally. So I have a slide here for questions, but Donna, I believe we do breakout rooms and then we do Q&A. Is that how this works?
Yeah, so what we're going to do is I think I'm back on. What we're going to do is take a quick 10-minute break, let everybody do fluid level adjustments, grab a cup of coffee or whatever you need to do, grab your lunch if you're going to have lunch. When you come back, you'll find invitation for breakout rooms. And the conversation in the breakout rooms is, like I said earlier, really your aha moments. What are your takeaways? What are you going to be able to add to your toolbox? And we'll do that for about 15 or 20 minutes. And then we'll join back together and do some share outs. So make sure that you have assigned or volunteered to be the spokesperson for your group. And I've asked Jason Kagabine, who's on the call and is working with Sheila and the group in Mathematica, to share just a couple of minutes, maybe about his experience. And then what his biggest takeaways have been and how he's seen it experientially in the classroom. So we'll give him about 3 minutes or so just to do that. So go ahead and take your break. If for some reason you don't have a mic and you can't share during the breakout rooms, I want to encourage you to still go ahead and participate. You can chat with one another, use the chat feature, or at least listen. Maybe you'll hear something you haven't heard before. But either way, make sure you come back right at 12:30 and we will bring everybody back into the main room. So 10-minute break thereabouts, and then we'll go into our breakout rooms. All right. Thanks. And Sheila, great presentation. Thank you so very much for sharing. I'm looking forward to having you part of the conversations and the Q&A that will follow.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for inviting me. I love getting to interact with other youth serving folks.
It's been great. We've loved our work with Mathematica, so I knew you'd do a great job. Okay, I'm going to freeze the recording for now and set up breakout rooms while you all take a break. We have a couple comments in the chat. Jennifer said, when I am in a school and we talk about self-regulation, I always ask them, how do they calm themselves down? Sometimes it's coloring, working out, taking a walk, tapping skills, or deep breathing. And I find it is important to say to the kids that emotions are normal, but how we react to them is what we can control. And we want to react in a way to keep ourselves safe and others safe.
Spot on. Brilliant. Really.
And then Natalie said, I thought it was interesting to view self-regulation as a system made up of several components. I think viewing it as a system will be helpful when working to control behaviors and thoughts in the future.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that, because I never thought about it that way until someone laid it out that way for me. And what I love about it is that, when we use the word self-regulation, or we tell people like use your coping skills, it can feel big, particularly if you haven't been doing it. It can just feel like a really big, amorphous, vague thing. And so breaking it into small pieces, we're able to say, in this moment right now, I just want you to focus on this part. Just this part. That's all you're responsible for right now. What how are you using your thinking skills to address this piece of this right now? Or what is the emotion you're feeling right now? Can you give a name to it? And I think you're right. Having these discrete, smaller pieces that we can use one at a time, I think can sometimes make it more accessible and easier to grow into, I guess I'll say, right? To develop it over time and break it down into easier pieces.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that emotional literacy goes hand in hand with this, because sometimes students don't have a name. They don't know what to call the way that they're feeling. And to Emily's point, we're not taught those things, or we haven't been to this point. So bringing those conversations about emotions and mental wellness into the classroom and helping students understand how to cope and how to de-escalate and all of those things, I think is such an important part of what we as youth workers are now trying to do and trying to bring into programming.
Yeah.
Xander says, I like when you talked about the cycles and how the regulated action cycle is used to learn from your situation and being open about your emotions.
Yeah. Sometimes I want to chart my own stuff out. The thing about naming an emotion, I gave that some thought a while ago, and I was like, when I'm in it and I'm not consciously thinking about it, it's like the emotion is driving the bus. But the minute I'm able to put a name to what that feeling is, I feel more in control of what's happening. The minute I can identify it and give it a name, then I have I've put it in a container. It's not all over the place anymore. And so it feels like something I can do something about. And so I think that naming it is really important. And then giving people that process. Hey, you have a name for it now. What do you want to do with it? That's, yeah.
Okay, Sheila, we have a hand raised.
Hi there. I'm not sure. Does my mic work? Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay,
Yep.
great.
Yeah.
So Sheila, first of all, just second on what's been said, such an incredible presentation. I really, really enjoyed it. And I just find myself sitting here in my office at work like, wow, how blessed am I that this is what I get to learn about and, kind of share with my community. And I have a question about what we've been doing recently. So I teach freshmen, like the entire freshman class at my local high school, social emotional lessons. And coincidentally, for the last month, I think, we've been doing lessons focused on emotions. And in my last class last week, sometimes I speak freely in class, kind of going off my personal thoughts and intuition. And I try to, do that as like, I guess not with a personal bias, but more so like personal experience. And something that just came to me last week is we went through kind of a really simple presentation on, the amygdala, lower brain, higher brain. And I said to them, my intention in giving this like anatomical perspective is I'm in the hopes that maybe you all can kind of like depersonalize emotions and realize that, sometimes we're victims to our bodies and emotions happen, and to maybe not identify so much with those emotions and take them on. But just realize that, we've got these mechanisms in our bodies that are going to bring about like fear, anxiety, shame, guilt, whatever. And so to that, I'm wondering if you think that I'm on the right track with even saying that to them. And also, if so, like I'm kind of limited, I teach in class during school hours. And I'm just like racking my brain, like, what can I do with these students as a fun activity to push these lessons along? I know that they're engaged to an extent and they're hearing me, but I want to bring more fun into these classes. And I know that emotions can sometimes just be a heavy topic.
You said a lot there that that I really relate to. And I'll start by saying it's been more recently, but I just kind of feel like emotions are feedback. It's just a feedback system.
Yeah,
right?
I agreed.
And so I work for a researcher. I'm not a researcher, but I work for a research organization. So I think to myself, emotions are data. That's what they are, right? And they're just telling me something is going on that I need to pay attention to.
Absolutely.
And when I'm able to think about it that way, they're not scary for me anymore. They also serve me really well. I mean, there are times when the emotion that I feel is fear. And that may be in service, right? That may be, if I'm walking around somewhere in the dark and I hear footsteps behind me, well, that's the feedback system saying, pay attention. There could be risk to you here. But there are times when my fears are about something entirely different. Like, you know what? All my life, like I don't know why. There's some part of me that's like, I think I'm going to get fired tomorrow. Like every day, there's some part of me that's like, you're going to get fired, right? I've never been fired. There's no basis for that. So I have to say to myself, where is this? What is this? This is some weird, right? What is that? Where's that anxiety coming from? What's happening right now that's generating anxiety for me? And so it's the beginning. It's the beginning of figuring out what's going on. And those things are my friends, right? I mean, they're just giving me information. But to your point, or I'm not sure if you said or someone else said it, it's information, what we do with it, right?
Yeah.
The other thing too is how we think. Thoughts are incredibly powerful. And we are storytellers. And so things happen and we feel emotions and we almost immediately begin to tell ourselves a story about that. The wonderful thing about recognizing that is that we're the storyteller. We can decide to change that story. You know, we can say, does that story that I'm telling myself about this, does that serve me? What might an alternate story be? You know, and so there's so much in terms of emotion. I think you are on the right path to say to them, emotions are just part of the mix. It's not anything to fear. It's. I told somebody the other day, I'm like, it's not hard. What's happening right now is not hard because you're doing it wrong. It's hard because it's hard, right?
Yeah.
It's not because you're doing anything wrong. It's just hard. And sometimes emotions push us and challenge us. But sometimes things are hard not because we're getting it wrong. They're hard because we're growing and learning through them.
Yeah.
And our emotions can be a part of that. So for me, it's helping people see emotions and these other things as tools for empowerment. It's so hard when you feel like you don't have a lot of control. And I think with adolescents, that's particularly with my work with youth in juvenile justice facilities and foster care group homes. Those are environments where they just don't have a lot of control over what's going on in their lives. Somebody tells them when to eat, somebody tells them when to shower, it's all, it's all so structured. And so to say to them, here are some things that you control. And your emotions are one of them. Don't let them drive the bus. Take a minute, figure out what's going on and use that. Use that information, use that feedback. That's powerful for you. That's going to help you figure out what's going on and get to where you want to be.
And
so that's,
I think,
I think, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think giving them the words to use. Emily, you asked about something fun, and it's a game that a lot of people use, I think, or an activity, but we use the color wheel to help teach the words. And if you get a bag of Skittles, the Skittles line up really well with the color wheel. And so we actually, in the juvenile detention center is where I enjoy doing this activity the most, because you see so many light bulbs come on with these kids. They're angry, they're pissed, they're frustrated, but they don't have words other than those two. Are they lonely? Are they disappointed? Are they rejected? Are they frustrated? Are they discouraged? They don't know those words. They don't have that language. But if you take and open your Skittle bag and you take a Skittle out of there and your color is red, then you look at the color wheel and all of those words and you think about a time that you felt some of those emotions, and then you share that story with the group that you're working with. All of a sudden they have new language and they come to realize they're not really pissed. They're scared, or they're disappointed, or they're, whatever other words there are that they could use to really express. So a little package of Skittles, plus they love the fact that after they tell their story, they get to eat their Skittles. So
candy always helps.
It's an easy activity. And you can find various types of color wheels, from very complicated ones to very simple ones, depending on the age and the time you want to spend with it. But it's an easy activity, relatively inexpensive, and opens doors for communication like no other activity that I do, actually. I think it's one of my favorite.
Thank you.
I've also seen, and I've used it myself, like I would gather up a grab bag of just truly random odds and ends, like an eraser and a rubber chicken and just whatever I could find, just different stuff, a pack of Post-its, whatever. And I would dump it out on the table almost sometimes as like a check-in. And I'd be like, okay, everybody come to the table and pick up the thing that represents how you feel today. And then we would, if, you could always pass if you wanted to, but, share. What's the eraser? Well, I just feel invisible today. What's going on there? And so it's giving them a way to access how they feel and talk about it, right?
Yeah.
So I think it also helps them build the skill of thinking critically about their emotions and expressing it. And that, I think, is to many of the points that have been made this afternoon, being able to name what they feel and tell you what it is and what it is and what the impact is for them. You know, I feel this. Okay. What's going on with that? Okay. And what's the impact for you of that feeling? How would you change it if you could? What do you think is in your control? Like, you can keep going with that line of questioning if you have time. It's time constraints are crazy, and they always they give me a headache. But it's the idea of teaching them, helping to teach them that process. But it's interesting if you just give them a collection of random stuff, what they come up with.
That's great.
It's
Thank
the
you.
vehicle for starting the thinking. Yeah. Absolutely.
All right, as we're coming to the end of our time, are there any other comments or questions? I don't see any hands raised, but I don't want to leave anybody out. If you'd like to share something. All right, well, Sheila, thank you again for your time, the excellent presentation. In case you didn't see it in the chat, Sheila has offered to provide a PDF version of the presentation for each of you. So later this week, you'll get a link to the recording. I missed a couple of moments here and there, so excuse the editing. Kelly, I see your hand. Hold on just a second. And then you'll get the link to the recording. You'll get a copy of the PDF file for the presentation. And you will also have a short, I promise it's only like 12 questions, I think, survey. If you can please take a moment to reply to that. That's how we know if we're doing a good job and bringing you the information that you are looking for. So we'd love your feedback on this presentation, and then some ideas on other topics that you might be interested in. So before I give my last little promo for what's coming next month, Kelly, you had your hand raised.
Actually, it was clapping hands. I just wanted to say thank you.
Clapping, perfect. I thought I saw a hand raised. So again, Sheila, in the chat, everybody's saying thank you, wonderful presentation. Next month, I am super excited. March is Drug and Alcohol Awareness, and we have a presentation by Special Agent Craig Koskowski, who was a Drug Enforcement Administration officer for 18 years. And he is going to be presenting to us One Pill Can Kill. And it is a conversation about opioids and fentanyl. And I would encourage you all, the email for this one, as well as the reminder that you got earlier today, has a link for registration, or you can visit our website to find out more information. If you're interested in any of our past webinars, they're all on our website, and you're welcome to listen to those as well. I just put a link to our website in the chat for your convenience. So thank you all very much for attending. I hope you have a great afternoon. And it's Ash Wednesday, so may you all have a blessed Easter season as well.